Thank you so much for that beautiful music today. When I was in my 20s, newly married and just out of college, my wife and I entered the Peace Corps, and we were posted to Malaysia in order to be math and science teachers. When we got the posting, we had to look at a map to see where Malaysia was, because being educated people, we had no idea because we live in America. It's just south of Thailand, as a matter of fact, north of Singapore, west of Cambodia and Vietnam, where our country was at war at the time. And because I was lucky with my draft number, I got to go into the Peace Corps voluntarily later. Now, Malaysia is a fascinating, it was then, still is, a fascinating multi-ethnic place to live. It's about 50% Malay who are Muslim, and about 40% overseas Chinese, and about 10% folks from India who are Hindu. So we got to have holidays and celebrations of all kinds. Now, most of our students were Muslim, as was the family that sort of adopted us, and from whom we became very close to them, and we learned a lot. Now, I offer that bit of personal history to explain why. When Reverend Christine was meeting with the worship associate several weeks ago and said the service today, April 3rd, was to be on Ramadan, and she would be away, and who wanted to give the sermon? After a silence, I said, okay, I'll do it. Now, I recognize that my experience from 50 years ago, just about, does not qualify me to speak with any authority about Islam or Ramadan. I am not Muslim. I have never participated in the monthly fast. I can describe the basic facts about Ramadan, as could anybody with access to Wikipedia. But as an attempt to remedy that limitation of mine, I was able to have conversations with folks who are Muslim and who are very generous with their time and thoughts. So today I want to do three things: describe the basic facts about what Ramadan is, and describe what my Muslim friends told me about what it means to them to go through this. And then also then to try to suggest some things that we Unitarian Universalists might be able to apply to our lives. So, some basics. Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, which is lunar. Each month begins with the sighting of the crescent moon, which happens roughly every 30 days. So the calendar shifts, Ramadan shifts, about 10 to 11 days each year relative to the Gregorian calendar, which is what we follow. Now this year, the beginning of Ramadan was last night, April 2nd. According to Islamic tradition, it was in the month of Ramadan that the angel Gabriel first began dictating the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad. And that is why Ramadan is the holy month. Now, Ramadan is observed by Muslims worldwide as a month of fasting, prayer, reflection, and community. Observing the fast is one of the 5 pillars of Islam and is obligatory for everyone who can do it, except for those who are otherwise exempt, such as women who are breastfeeding or pregnant or menstruating. And what does the fast mean? It means that from the first light of dawn, not sunrise, but the first light of dawn until sunset, you don't eat and you don't drink. No food or water from the first light of dawn until sunset. Also, they are to refrain from tobacco or generally any sinful behavior, and to focus on prayer, the reading of the Quran, reciting the Quran, and general spiritual exercise. So, why? Why do this? This is what my Muslim friends were explaining to me. By the way, it is a hard thing to do. When I was in Malaysia, I decided one day during the fasting month I would give it a try. And I lasted maybe a few hours before I just felt I needed to drink, and that was it for me. And the conversations I had emphasized some key reasons for people who do this, what they get out of it. One is that the actual experience, bodily feeling of hunger and thirst, tends to make you more empathetic with the people for whom it isn't a choice, people who are hungry and thirsty all the time because of their circumstance. It makes you more empathetic. It makes you more willing to give to charity, to give alms, and giving alms is another one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's also true that doing without makes you more appreciative of what you have. Fasting helps you realize what you take for granted. And in a way, we have been fasting for about 2 years now, not being able to have the human connections that are so important to us, almost as important as bread and water. And it feels so good now to begin to be able to break that fast. Another benefit that people mentioned was that successfully refraining from doing these things that you really want to do, eat and drink, increases your capacity to withstand temptation in general. It's not just the fasting. You're also spending the month in reflection, reading the Quran, reflecting privately, and in communal prayer. It's a month of spiritual exercise, both physical and mental. A month of recommitment to the faith and all that it means. The goal is to become stronger, a better person, and to demonstrate your devotion to God by doing this hard thing. There is also the aspect of community. If you are Muslim, and especially living among Muslims, you're doing this with everyone around you. You're doing it with people worldwide. When we were living in this small town in Malaysia, the food shops were very busy after sunset when people could gather, because this was a time that people were basically celebrating their community and a lot of socializing. And then the big feast at the end of the fast is the biggest holiday of the year. And people go around and visit friends and family. Lots of fun foods are made and people go around. And we were taken around by the family that had sort of adopted us to visit all the folks in the compound. We didn't realize that we should not eat very much at the first place. It tasted good, but it was too much. So every culture has its celebrations where people connect, right? We are social creatures. We need to do this. This is the biggest one of the Islamic year that will happen at the end of Ramadan. Okay. So, why should those of us who are not Muslim care about any of this? Is knowing this useful in any way to us other than general knowledge in this interconnected world? Well, let me go back to those opening words from Reverend Galen Gingrich. In the same way that Judaism is defined by obedience, Christianity by love, and Islam by submission, I believe that Unitarian Universalism should be defined by gratitude. So you probably expected something from me about gratitude. No. Thankfully, perhaps, no. I want to dig into something that is more difficult and more connected to Islam and Ramadan, and that is submission. Submission. I imagine that that is a word that makes a lot of us very uncomfortable. The word Islam means submission. Submission to God or the will of God. And a Muslim means, the word means, one who submits. The word Islam is based on the three-letter, three-consonant sequence SLM, which is the basis of many Arabic words that are centered around concepts related to wholeness, submission, sincerity, safety, and peace, the latter being the word salam. The traditional greeting between Muslims begins with the phrase, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. And the response is, Wa alaikum salam, and upon you peace. So there's a deep connection, both in language and practice, between peace and submission. So here's a question, here's a thought. Does peace require submission? And I'm not talking about appeasing an aggressor or giving up principles that are most important, but rather acknowledging that our knowledge is limited and we should approach our interactions with some humility. If we want ours to be a more peaceful culture, do we need to balance our rampant American individualism with a willingness to commit or submit more of our energies and resources to the greater good? Now, Islam is part of a long religious tradition. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are three Abrahamic faiths, that is, traditionally originating with the patriarch Abraham, with Judaism coming first. The word Judaism, Jews, comes from the name Judah, who was a great-grandson of Abraham through his son Isaac. Christianity, of course, is based on the teachings and life of Jesus, who traditionally comes through the line of David, which also goes back to Abraham. And Islam is also connected to Abraham through a different son of Abraham, Ishmael. And that began in 610 CE. Now, for all these differences, and there certainly are differences, all three have in common some basic things. One is that there's this fundamental concept that there is one God who is the creator and who has dominion over his creation. And he's separate from creation, has dominion and authority over it. People, humans, were created by God, separate from nature, over which we have dominion and authority. People are separate from the rest of creation. The material and spiritual worlds are connected but separate, with the material answering to the spiritual. And at least in Christianity and in Islam, less clearly in Judaism, bodies have souls, and souls don't die. And for all these Abrahamic faiths, to live a good life is to obey God's commandments as best you can, and to confess your shortcomings, because we always fall short. God commands, and we obey. Hence, Reverend Gingrich's summary that Judaism is defined by obedience and Islam by submission. In Christianity, which is defined by love, love is still a commandment. Jesus said that there are two greatest commandments. One is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and the other is to love your neighbor as yourself. Love is a commandment to which we should submit. Now, clearly, other traditions see all of this very differently. The relationship between humanity and the natural world and the divine quite differently. Reverend Christine spoke a couple weeks ago about process theology, in which God and humanity co-create each other. We, UUs, try to incorporate these ideas, learn from these different ideas, and in our own lives figure out how we can use them to ourselves improve our understanding of the world and become better people. We are theologically diverse, as we say, and open to different ideas. At least we aspire to be open. So what can we take from the Islamic practice of Ramadan? Or for that matter, for the similar but less rigorous Christian practices of Ash Wednesday and Lent? What can we learn from and benefit from this concept of submission? Well, let me offer a couple of ideas. For one, there is value in acknowledging that I am not in control of very much at all. Not very much at all. To the extent that I can control myself, I should. To the extent that I can help others, I should. To the extent that I can behave justly with humility and compassion and love, I should. To the extent that I can extend what I've been doing and do more, I should. I should do what I can and then let it go. Let it go. I cannot control the outcome. I'm not in charge. I need to submit at least to my own limits and then find some peace. Not that letting go is easy. Submission means understanding that I have both obligations and limitations and doing my best with both. That's a fundamental truth about the human condition that appears in all wisdom traditions. It's in the Old and New Testament. It's in the Bhagavad Gita. And it's in Islam's phrase that we heard all so often when we were in Malaysia, appended to any statement about expectations about the future. Inshallah, God willing. It's good to be reminded of that. The second thought follows from the first. In fact, we have to submit, at least to the certainty of our own death. But beyond that, life is richer when we feel that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We individually here are not beholden to any particular creed. We can each choose where to direct our energies. But as Bob Dylan sang back in 1979, you gotta serve somebody. Might be the devil, might be the Lord, but you gotta serve somebody. For me, to serve, to be a servant, feels like a form of submission, consenting to add my drop to the bigger flow and accepting that I do not know where it is going. So finally, is anyone in charge? Do we submit to anything besides complexity? Well, if I were a good rabbi, or minister, or priest, or imam, I would probably counsel having faith in the Almighty who has a plan. I cannot do that. But neither am I a cynical nihilist. It may be that all we have is this world and each other, for however long we are in it. I suspect that is so, and for me, that is enough. I will submit to my ignorance, submit to the mysteries, and just be thankful, so thankful for this inexplicable fact that I am here. And so we are back to gratitude. I'm glad we are together. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.